Rebecca didn't rush to fill the silence. She had spent nearly 25 years dealing with people at the worst moments of their lives. She understood that sometimes silence revealed more truth than words ever could. Finally, I leaned back in the leather chair and stared at the ceiling. I raised him, I whispered. I know. I taught him how to drive. I helped him get through college. When he wanted to start his construction business, I co-signed the equipment loan, because no bank would approve a young contractor with no financial history. Rebecca nodded without interrupting. I believed in him. You still do. Her words caught me off guard. I looked at her. No, I said after a long pause. You wouldn't be struggling this much if you didn't. I wanted to argue. Instead, I realized she was right. Part of me still hoped there was some explanation. That would make everything make sense. Maybe Dylan had gotten involved with the wrong people. Maybe Vanessa had convinced him this was only temporary. Maybe. The excuses kept coming, even though the security footage had already answered every question. Rebecca slowly closed my phone and slid it back across the table. Michael, people rarely wake up one morning and decide to betray someone they love. These kinds of things usually happen one compromise at a time. I rubbed my temples. So what do? We protect you. And them. She sighed. That's no longer your responsibility. Outside her office window, downtown Franklin looked exactly the way it always had. Cars rolled past antique shops. A couple pushed a stroller down the sidewalk. Someone walked a golden retriever that seemed determined to sniff every flower pot on Main Street. It amazed me how ordinary the world could look, while someone else's life was collapsing. Rebecca broke the silence. I don't want you staying at the house tonight. What? If Vanessa realizes you know about the documents before we're ready, she'll start covering her tracks. I can't hide in a hotel. You can. I'm 61 years old. And someone just tried to use your property without permission. She held my gaze. I'd rather have you angry with me than vulnerable. I knew better than to argue with her when she spoke in that tone. She had used the same voice after my heart attack 4 years earlier. That time she insisted I take 6 weeks away from work. I hated every minute of it. She had been right then. Something told me she was right now too. By early afternoon, I checked into a small hotel a few miles from my office. The lobby smelled like fresh coffee and furniture polish. The young woman at the front desk smiled as she handed me a room key. Business trip. I forced a smile. Something like that. She wished me a pleasant stay. If only she knew. The room was spotless. Fresh sheets. A television mounted on the wall. A small desk beside the window. I'd stayed in hundreds of hotels while building my landscaping company. Usually they represented growth. New contracts. New opportunities. New cities. This one represented something entirely different. I wasn't traveling for business. I was hiding from my own family. I sat on the edge of the bed without taking off my boots. For the first time all day, complete silence surrounded me. That silence was unbearable. Every corner of the room reminded me of home. Normally around this time, Vanessa would text asking if I wanted grilled chicken or steak for dinner. Some evenings Dylan would stop by after work covered in dust and complain about subcontractors while stealing whatever leftovers were in our refrigerator. Those evenings had felt ordinary. Now I wondered how many of those conversations had been genuine. How many smiles had been rehearsed? While many hugs had hidden another motive? How long had they been planning this? My phone buzzed. Rebecca, I found something else. I sat upright. What is it? Dylan isn't having simple cash flow problems. She paused. He's drowning. 45 minutes later, I was back in her office. This time, several printed documents covered the conference table. Rebecca pushed them toward me. The first page showed Dylan's construction company. The second listed outstanding debts. The third contained court filings. Each page seemed worse than the one before it. He personally guaranteed over $800,000 in loans. I blinked. Oh, that can't be right. I wish it wasn't. She pointed to another section. 3 subcontractors have filed claims for unpaid invoices. Another page. A private investor sued him last month. Another. His equipment lease is nearly 3 months behind. I stared at the stack of papers. Every Sunday afternoon, Dylan sat across from me on the back porch talking about how well business was going. He talked about expansion, hiring more crews, buying another excavator. He sounded proud, confident, successful. It had all been a lie. Rebecca quietly folded her hands. People in financial trouble often become very good actors. I let out a slow breath. So that's what this is. He needs money immediately. I would have helped him. I know. I've always helped him. I know. She didn't say it with judgment. Only sadness. A memory drifted into my mind. Dylan was 17. He had crashed that same red pickup truck into our mailbox, trying to impress a girl. The front bumper looked terrible. He stood in the driveway expecting me to explode. Instead, I grounded him for a month. The following morning, we spent the entire weekend fixing the truck together. Halfway through replacing the bumper, he smiled. I figured you'd just yell. I wanted you to learn something. I did. What? That messing up doesn't mean people stop loving you. The memory hit harder than I expected. I had spent years teaching him that mistakes didn't erase love. Somewhere along the way, he had learned something very different. Rebecca interrupted my thoughts.
Michael. Yeah? I need you focused. I nodded. She pulled out another folder. This part is important. She sketched several boxes on a yellow legal pad. This box represents your residence. She drew another. This one is your commercial property. Then another. This represents Carter Development Holdings. She circled it. The commercial property isn't owned directly by you. It's owned by the company. Correct. And the company is controlled by your trust. Exactly. I frowned. So legally they can't borrow against it. No. Then why steal my paperwork? Rebecca looked directly at me. Because paperwork creates confidence. I stayed silent. A private lender moving quickly doesn't always investigate every detail immediately. She tapped the legal pad. If convincing documents appear legitimate, money can move before anyone realizes they're fraudulent. The words settled heavily inside me, so they weren't trying to steal the land. No, they were trying to borrow money using it. Yes, and leave me responsible. She nodded. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked the question I had been avoiding. What happens if they'd succeeded? Rebecca answered honestly. You might have spent years untangling the damage. I swallowed hard. Years. One decision, one betrayal, years of consequences. That evening I stopped by my doctor's office instead of going back to the hotel. Not because I felt sick, because I knew what stress had already done to my heart once before. The nurse checked my blood pressure twice. Both readings were higher than normal. Dr. Patel entered carrying my chart. You look exhausted. I am. He studied my face. Rebecca called. I nodded. You don't have to tell me every detail. I'm glad. But you do have to promise me something. What? No unnecessary confrontations. I almost laughed. That's easier said than done. It usually is. He adjusted his glasses. Your heart survived one major event. He looked me straight in the eye. Let's not volunteer for another. By the time I returned to the hotel, darkness had settled over Franklin. Rain tapped softly against the window. The television played quietly in the background, though I wasn't watching it. Around 7:30, there was a knock at the door. I opened it. Miguel stood there holding 2 grocery bags. I hope you don't mind. Inside were my reading glasses, my blood pressure medicine, fresh clothes, my shaving kit, even my favorite coffee mug. I looked at him in surprise. You went back to the house? I only collected things that belonged to you. He stepped inside awkwardly. Neither of us spoke for almost a minute. Finally, I asked, Miguel? Yes? Were they always like this? He hesitated. I don't know everything, but you know something. He slowly nodded. Dylan started asking a lot of questions these last few months. What kind of questions?
That tells me she's already assuming she knows your routine. Michael's expression hardened. So she's confident. Very. Rebecca slid another document across the table, which means she's expecting the loan process to continue. Michael looked down. The paper displayed the logo of a private lending company based in Atlanta. Across the top were the words, verification appointment scheduled, asterisk asterisk. His stomach tightened. They already set a meeting? Rebecca nodded. Tomorrow morning. But, he looked confused. They don't have my permission. They don't need it if they believe your wife has legal authority. Michael leaned back in his chair. So what happens tomorrow? Rebecca gave a slow smile. Tomorrow, they discover they walked into a trap. Meanwhile, nearly 2,000 miles away, Vanessa sat beside the resort's swimming pool in Cabo San Lucas. Tourists laughed nearby. Children splashed in the water. A waiter placed 2 tropical drinks on the table. From the outside, she looked like a woman enjoying a perfect vacation. Inside, she couldn't relax. She glanced toward Dylan, who was scrolling nervously through his phone. Anything? He shook his head. Nothing yet. She lowered her sunglasses. Did the lender email? No. What about the title company? No. For the first time all morning, Dylan looked genuinely worried. Mom, what? What if he already knows? Vanessa immediately shook her head. He doesn't. How can you be sure? Because if Michael knew. She smiled confidently. He would have called. Dylan wasn't convinced. You know him. He always confronts people. She leaned closer. If he hasn't called, he doesn't know. Neither of them realized that at that exact moment. Michael and Rebecca were preparing a response neither of them expected. Back in Tennessee, Rebecca picked up another folder. I spent most of last night researching the lender. Michael listened carefully. They specialize in high-value commercial loans. So, they move extremely fast. How fast? If paperwork looks legitimate, they can release millions within 72 hours. Michael stared at her. They would have had the money before I even realized what happened. Rebecca nodded. Exactly, she continued. But they're also extremely protective of themselves. What does that mean? If they discover fraud before releasing funds, they cooperate fully with investigators. Michael slowly smiled. So once they know the truth, they'll help us. Rebecca nodded again. That's exactly what I'm counting on. Just then, someone knocked on the conference room door. Rebecca's assistant stepped inside. There's someone here asking for Mr. Carter. Michael frowned. Who? The assistant looked confused. He says his name is Detective Alan Brooks. Michael exchanged a surprised glance with Rebecca. I didn't call the police. Rebecca stood. I did. Moments later, a tall man in his early 50s entered the room carrying a thin leather folder. About insurance, / He looked uncomfortable. Property values. Another pause. And whether you plan to retire soon. My stomach tightened. I thought he was interested in taking over someday. So did I. Miguel lowered his eyes. I guess I was wrong. He looked up again. Mr. Carter. What? You remember when Rosa had surgery? His wife. Of course. You paid me for 6 weeks while I stayed home with her. I shrugged. You would have done the same. He smiled sadly. I hope so. Then his expression became serious. What they did? He searched for the words. That's their shame. He pointed gently toward me. Not yours. Those 4 words nearly broke me. For the first time since the phone call that morning, I felt tears forming. Not because of Vanessa. Not because of Dylan. Because loyalty still existed. And it was standing in front of me carrying grocery bags instead of legal documents. Later that night, just as Michael believed nothing could hurt more than the betrayal he had already witnessed, Rebecca called with shocking new evidence. Someone had submitted paperwork claiming he was mentally unfit to manage his own finances, and the signature attached to the documents looked disturbingly authentic. In that moment, Michael realized this was never just about stealing money. It was about stealing his entire identity. Michael didn't put the phone down immediately. Even after the call had ended, he kept staring at the dark screen, replaying every word Vanessa had spoken. For 12 years, he had believed he knew every tone in her voice. He could tell when she was excited, when she was worried, and when she was hiding a birthday surprise. But this morning was different. Her concern had sounded rehearsed. Her questions had been too specific. She hadn't asked how he was feeling. She hadn't asked whether he'd eaten breakfast. She hadn't even asked if he missed her. Instead, every question centered around one thing. His memory. His judgment. His ability to manage his own affairs. Rebecca had been right. Vanessa wasn't calling as a wife. She was calling as someone trying to confirm whether her plan was still safe. Less than 30 minutes later, Michael walked into Rebecca Sloane's office carrying a cup of untouched coffee. She looked up from a stack of legal papers the moment he entered. You talked to her. Michael nodded. I recorded the call. Rebecca smiled faintly. I was hoping you would. He handed her the phone. She plugged it into a speaker and listened carefully. Neither of them spoke while Vanessa's cheerful voice filled the conference room. When the recording ended, Rebecca pressed pause and wrote several notes. Finally, she looked up. Did you notice what she never asked? Michael frowned. What? She never asked where you were. He thought about it. She was right. Vanessa hadn't asked whether he was home, at work, or visiting friends. She had only wanted to know whether he sounded confused. Rebecca folded her hands.
He introduced himself with a firm handshake.
Mr. Carter? Michael nodded. Detective? I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. So am I. The detective sat across from them. Rebecca summarized everything that had happened during the previous 24 hours. The airport, the security footage, the stolen documents, the forged affidavit, the suspicious loan application. The detective listened without interrupting. When she finished, he asked only one question. "Do you still have the original security recordings?" Michael nodded. "Every second." The detective smiled. "Good. Why?" "Because those videos may become the strongest evidence in the entire case." Michael looked relieved. "So you believe me?" The detective almost laughed. "Mr. Carter?" He tapped the folder gently. "I've investigated fraud for nearly 20 years. He looked Michael straight in the eyes. "People lie. Documents get forged. But security cameras," he smiled, "they rarely do." For the first time since leaving the airport, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in almost 2 days. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, the truth would win after all. But none of them realized that another surprise was already waiting. Because hundreds of miles away, someone had just forwarded a message to Vanessa. It contained only 4 words. "He knows everything." Vanessa stared at the screen. And for the first time since the plan began, she felt genuine fear. The anonymous message changed everything. Within minutes, Vanessa and Dylan canceled the rest of their vacation and booked the first flight home. They weren't returning to apologize. They were returning to destroy every piece of evidence before the investigation could stop them. Unfortunately for them, Detective Brooks had already made his first move, and someone at the airport was waiting for their plane to land. Vanessa's fingers tightened around her phone as she read the message for the 3rd time. "He knows everything." There was no sender's name. No explanation, no signature, just 4 words. Yet they were enough to drain every bit of confidence from her face. Across the table, Dylan noticed the change immediately. "Mom?" She didn't answer. "Mom, what's wrong?" Without saying a word, she turned the phone toward him. Dylan read the message. His expression instantly changed. "No." His voice cracked. "Who sent that?" "I don't know. Maybe it's fake." Maybe. Neither of them believed it. For nearly 2 minutes, they sat in complete silence, while the sounds of the luxury resort continued around them. Tourists laughed in the swimming pool. Music drifted from the beach bar. A waiter asked whether they wanted another drink. Neither of them even looked up. The vacation was over. Back in Franklin, Michael sat across from Detective Alan Brooks inside Rebecca Sloane's office. The detective spread several photographs across the conference table. "They're still in Mexico," Michael nodded.